motorcycle, crashed in FP3 and retired from the race, clunking into the barrier at turn 4. But since then, Seb has faced off against the best of the midfield in the 9th best car, taking 5 points finishes, including a best of 6th at Baku, and is currently tied at 12 with Pierre Gasly in the Drivers' Championship. And he's had his fair share of bad luck as well, with his only 2 finishes outside of the top 12 coming about because of a spin caused by championship rival Gasly in Austria, as well as a coming together between himself and Mick in Miami, which ended up with neither taking points, as we know, despite both being in a position to do so. Seb has impressed considerably this year, especially when compared to his teammate, and could be able to take another top 6 finish this season, but he needs to improve his qualifying form as well. He is often so close, yet so far from Q2 in the Aston Martin, a reason why Seb hasn't been higher up in the field, and the reason why he is pipped to P8 by Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri has also been flying this season, with 7 points finishes to his name, never having dipped out of the top 10 in the WDC, and never having qualified lower than 15th. Valtteri has dominated his teammate, as I said before, we all expected that, and has always been in the midfield fight as well. He's also had bad luck at multiple occasions, with 2 retirements in the past 4 races, both caused by car issues, and another back in round 2. Valtteri is also almost single-handedly keeping Alfa Romeo in 6th in the WCC, and can be thanked for over 90% of Sauber's points this year. On his current form, Valtteri could well make it onto the podium by the end of the season. Now it's 7th, and I've placed Lando Norris here. Lando has been clear of Daniel so far this season, and the difference is especially stark when you look at the head-to-head. Lando has finished ahead of his teammate 9 out of 13 times, and has out-qualified him on 11 occasions, leaving the team leader with, I kid you not, exactly 4 times the amount of points as Danny Rick. But the reason why Lando is 7th in my ranking is not because Daniel has been driving abhorrently, but because Lando has been driving professionally. After the farce for McLaren that was the opener in Bahrain, Lando came back with a bang, and after his first top 5 finish of the season in round 3, he managed to nab a podium at Imola. From 15th to 3rd in 3 races. Since then, Lando has scored points a further 7 times, and only missed out in Miami as he was taken out by Pierre Gasly. Apart from a poor Canadian Grand Prix in which the McLaren suffered in the wet qualifying, this season has been spotless for Lando. P6 is next, and it's hammer time. What a last 6 races it's been. Lewis has been driving out of his skin recently, with a P4 in Baku despite breaking his back in the process nearly. 3 third-place finishes on the bounce, one of which being the British Grand Prix, which was highlighted by the now iconic "Through Goes Hamilton." And these last 2 races, back-to-back P2s. Despite all of the difficulties Lewis had at the start of the season, with that P16 in Saudi qualifying and the nightmare at Imola, Lewis has really risen to the occasion and may soon join his teammate in surpassing Carlos Sainz in the Drivers' Championship, if his form continues to rise. 3 third places, 2 second places, surely it's time for 1 victory. Now for 5th place, and I'm afraid it's Charles Leclerc. Charles' title challenge has been dismantled through poor Ferrari strategy, alongside numerous mechanical failures, which have stripped the Monegasque of at least 4 victories, and yet more podiums. Thanks to the multitude of errors, which I've ranted about many a time this season, Charles now has fewer podiums than Lewis Hamilton, and has only been able to convert 2 of his 7 pole positions into victory. However, the reason why Charles, in my completely non-biased opinion, is down in 5th is because he's made mistakes in key moments, losing out on yet another victory in France due to spinning out, and throwing away a guaranteed 2nd place at Imola because of a spin. This shows a lack of composure from the young driver, a factor that benefits Max Verstappen in my ranking this year, something that I will go on to talk about later. Furthermore, despite being in the best car on the grid, Charles was unable to carve through the field after taking a grid penalty in Canada, which, with the same tenacity as drivers such as Lewis Hamilton with his comeback in Brazil last year, Charles having struggled to make his way through the field, and it only being thanks to a fortuitous safety car that he managed to reach the top 5 in that race. Yes, Charles has driven brilliantly for the majority of the season, and yes, he has been very unlucky, but some of the disappointment of this season's failure for Ferrari has to land on his shoulders as a title challenger. P4 is next, and it's Sergio Perez. While the likes of Daniel Ricciardo and Carlos Sainz have struggled this year in their 2nd season, Checo has thrived at Red Bull. He has finished in the top 5 in every race that he's finished this year, including 6 podiums. He has also been Max Verstappen's rock all year long, with displays of generosity in both Spain and Baku, despite itching to race with his teammate. Sergio is still 3rd in the championship as well, and could certainly pass Charles Leclerc, who's only 5 points up the road, by the end of the season. Not only have Sergio's race results improved though, which have meant that he has at one point been in the championship fight, despite being the 2nd Red Bull driver, and also that Red Bull are more likely to be comfortable in 1st place in the WCC come season's end, but Sergio has also improved slightly in qualifying, with his 1st pole position in the sport coming in Saudi Arabia. However, it has not been all smiles, as Checo has failed to reach Q2 twice in the last 5 races, in Canada and Hungary, so it's clear that there are still improvements to be made. Furthermore, he's retired 3 times so far this season, which seems poor on paper until one appreciates that they were all mechanical issues, and none of the 3 were his fault. On the whole, this has been a fantastic sophomore year for Checo, and he could challenge for the title next year if his form continues to improve. Okay, we've got to the top 3, and the first man on the podium is Fernando Alonso in 3rd place. Fernando has been the underground star of the season, and that's something that not all of the stats can tell you. I mean, he's been beaten out by his teammate in the race 8 times, is 17 points behind him in the championship, is 2 places down on him in the WDC as a result of the fact that he's retired twice. Well, what these at-a-glance stats don't really portray is the quality of Fernando's racing so far this year. Not only is Fernando currently on an 8-race point-scoring streak, but some of his qualifying performances this year have been simply sublime. He could easily have been on pole in an Alpine in Australia had it not been for a throttle issue, and took P2 in the wet in Canada. He was taken out by Mick Schumacher in the opening lap at Imola and retired from the points with an engine failure in Saudi. It's quite difficult to quantify what has made this season for Fernando so good, but I think that's because we're seeing the sparks of the Alonso of old, in the 4th and 5th best car on the grid. Very few drivers in the 21st century will be able to repeat such a feat, but Fernando is doing so in flying colours. Only the dominance of the Red Bulls is keeping him out of reach of the podium places. And speaking of Red Bull's domination this year, I've placed Max Verstappen in second in my drivers' ranking. What a year it's been for Max Verstappen once more. With most of the people in my rankings so far, I've been praising them, for example, having only 3 races outside of the points. To put how well Max has been performing into perspective, he's only been off the podium 3 times. 10 podiums, including 8 race wins, with 9 races left in the season. What a performance. One such race victory was in Hungary, the most recent round of the season, and one which epitomises the quality of Max this year. He started the race in 10th on the grid, down on the front due to a power issue in quali. Despite this handicap, Max fought through the field, making some exquisite overtakes on the Alpine cars, and was able to take the lead thanks to a blunder in strategy by Ferrari, as we all know. However, Max spun out at turn 13, but he had the composure to continue and repass Charles Leclerc for the race victory. This feat was also repeated earlier in the season from spin to win, as the Dutchman spun out in Spain at turn 4, but continued once again to take the race victory. Max has also held mental fortitude when in the lead with pressure from behind. The perfect example being in Canada, where Max was forced to drive inch perfectly in the last 10 laps so as to protect his victory from Carlos Sainz. The 3 races in which he did not finish on the podium were the 2 retirements in the first 3 races at the start of the season, both mechanical, and Great Britain, where he suffered damage to his Red Bull's bodywork, yet still managed to overtake 2 cars in the final 3 laps in order to snag a P7. Despite Leclerc's bad luck, it will take nothing away from how strong this year has been for Max, and his inevitable second World Championship victory will be well deserved. And finally, for my top driver of the first 13 rounds of the 2022 Formula One World Championship is Mr. Consistency himself, George Russell. 13 races, 12 top 5s, 5 podiums, 1 pole position, 158 points, 4th in the championship. In my opinion, George Russell has single-handedly given Mercedes the morale boost that it needed at the start of the season, which propelled the team onto their current form, often driving through pain to podium finishes, such as in Baku. There's not much more to say which hasn't been said already about how brilliant George Russell has been performing this season. He's come in to a new team, Mercedes. The expectations have been brutally high, and he's driven to complete perfection, surpassing all of the expectations that he's had from day one. Lewis may now have more podiums than George Russell, but George most certainly revived the Mercedes season, and I know many, many F1 fans who are very grateful for that indeed. Thank you for listening to F1 Every Week. As I said at the start, feel free to drop your rankings for the first 13 rounds of the season down below if you're watching on YouTube, and tune in next week for the first race review in nearly a month, that of the Belgian Grand Prix.